Before we dive into today's episode, I've got some exciting news. FutureLab, Australia's first longevity supplement range, is now available at Chemist Warehouse and leading health food stores. Now, this is a lot more than a regular supplement range. It really is a mission. The experts at FutureLab have developed formulas designed to support your well-being today, tomorrow, and beyond. Welcome to FutureLab, where we explore the cutting edge of health span and well-being. I'm Danny Urbinder, and with me is Dr. Denise Furness.
Hello.
And Trevor Hendy.
Hello, guys. Super excited again.
Yeah, well, we've got a super exciting guest today and talking about something that is extremely relevant to the topic of our interest, which is health span, which is hormones.
Now, and perimenopause, definitely an important one for both of you as well.
Yeah, in fact, I'd really like to focus on perimenopause and menopause because this is happening too.
I'm a husband, so I have to know this.
You're like, we are living it too. Yeah, everyone's living it.
This is golden information for me.
There's more women on the planet now going through perimenopause and menopause than there ever has been. It's
that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we've got someone who can talk about this in detail. We've got Zoe Bingley-Pullin here today, who's an Australian nutritionist, chef, and author. She's got a background in culinary nutrition and has just written a book called Eat Your Way to Healthy Hormones, and that delves into the essential role that diet plays in supporting women's health all through life stages. So we spoke about perimenopause and going into menopause as well. So welcome, Zoe.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everyone.
Hi. So it must be very exciting having released that book. So Eat Your Way to Healthy Hormones. It's an intriguing title. Just wondering what inspired you to write that book.
Yeah, look, it was an interesting personal journey that actually got me kind of into the excitement of knowing more about my hormones. I found out I couldn't have children at a very young age, so sort of went down the IVF path and had my beautiful daughter after 5 years. And it wasn't until I started to try for another child again that I was kind of put under the microscope all over again, because at 39, I was told that I was perimenopausal. Now, you would think that I would know what that was, but interestingly enough, I actually didn't exactly know what that actually was and what that meant to me as well. So I thought I would kind of take all of that knowledge and put it in a book, basically, which is what I did.
Okay, so then you didn't sort of know the details of what perimenopause was. What did you learn on that journey in writing that book?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting area of understanding where our hormones actually lie, because again, obviously, we look at perimenopause as sort of this junction, this change, this incredible fluctuation of our hormones. Because again, when often I see a client, people will simply say, I want some sort of answer to this, but the reality is there actually isn't an answer, because what we have for the first time is such a huge amount of fluctuation in our hormones as well. So often what you're going to feel is a severity of different symptoms. You might find that your energy levels are compromised. You might find that your sleep is starting to get a little bit out of, kilter to what it normally is. You might find that your period is actually becoming a little bit inconsistent as well. Or you might find that you're just starting to get just the starting symptoms of hot flashes. Or it could even be as simple as your joint pain as well. Now, the issue with that is that when you're 40 or in anywhere between sort of 35 to 45, that could just be life as well. Because often what we're dealing with is a scenario where we might be fatigued, we have young children, we have older parents, and we have a huge amount of stress in our environment as well. So there are other symptoms, like, for example, thyroid issues that could be actually impacting something like that.
Yes, I am 46 and really starting to notice things. If you noticed a few things around 44, then everything stopped for a year, and I don't know if that stopped because that's normal for me, because who knows what's normal for them, or at the time I was actually a lot more focused on my health. I actually do think it's because I was working on my health, my nutrition, my sleep. I do find that when I'm a little bit stressed, particularly international travel, exacerbates a lot of my symptoms. But
yeah, well, look.
Yes, I was just going to say I jumped into perimenopause, but actually your book is about hormones in general too, more than just perimenopause. And I was wondering if you could comment on andropause, because I'm thinking about you with your sleep too.
We're going there already,
Yeah, we are going there already.
We're diving into the men's world.
Yeah, so it's
really interesting.
I think Zoe could actually help to talk to us about that too.
Yeah, look, What's really interesting is men have a sort of a gradual decline in testosterone that, you know, sort of doesn't kind of have these sort of fluctuations like we do when it comes to our estrogen and our testosterone and our progesterone. So often for men, it's not that they can all of a sudden feel these changes in difference. What often happens also is that we're looking at how we're testing. So it's really important that men have regular tests when it comes to their testosterone, because often what they're getting is they're getting one result, they're getting their testosterone, but what we really need to look at is their free testosterone. So free testosterone means that it is what is able to be used and bound and used as a functional hormone as well. So there's many, many impacts. But again, we tend to have that perfect storm often happening as men get older. More likely they're putting on weight, their exercise is changing, they find that their lifestyle, they might be drinking more as well. So we get this conversion as that happens is a enzyme called aromatase. And what actually happens is that the more weight we gain, the more that enzyme will actually convert testosterone into estrogen as well. So it's really, really important in this period of their life that we are looking at all processes of health. The other thing also, you know, when I'd often talk in seminars and what have you, it's important to actually understand that we have this, men and women have the same hormone apart from things like anti-Murillia hormones. So we have the same hormones, but at different varies and at different amounts as well. So men do actually have to look at the whole severity. It's not just looking at testosterone. It could be our sex binding hormone. But again, it's also really, really looking at our adrenals, because what often happens is that we have the ovaries and the testes producing these sort of main sexual hormones, but then we also have the adrenal glands actually producing them as well. So when we get a decline, you know, in estrogen, or we get a decline in testosterone, we really start recruiting our adrenals. So it's very, very important that we are doing a lot of adrenal or stress support. And then on the flip side, it's processes of detoxification. You know, we need to look at what we call the phase 3, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of liver detoxification. They require a huge amount of different vitamins and minerals and things like glutathione and antioxidants. And it's critically important that we are actually supporting those pathways, because otherwise what will happen is we can get some circulating hormones building up, and we're more likely to have an increase in the severity of those symptoms.
Okay, so let's wind back, because there's quite a bit of information that you've just covered off there.
Yes.
So look, both in terms of...
We've jumped straight in there. I love it.
So both in terms of women, and we can talk perimenopause and menopause, and men when we're talking about andropause, we share largely the same hormones.
This is a hormone masterclass, isn't it? For men and women, right?
It's a
Yes,
hormone
there you go.
Yeah.
So in terms of men, the big thing to watch out for is a drop in testosterone, and that can certainly be exacerbated by an increased weight gain, which therefore affects the aromatase enzyme. What happens in women's case? Because it's not just a testosterone drop; it's other hormones as well.
No, not at all. So as basically we get to through perimenopause, we get a decrease in mainly estrogen and progesterone as well. We have those sort of natural fluctuations that will happen, and you know, when we look at perimenopause, because it's not a linear decline. It's not like we are declining on all those hormones. It's consistently fluctuating. So we can't really pinpoint exactly which one we should be ascertaining. So what we have to look at is that overall health. So we need to really look at mainly what we do have control of, which is making sure we're getting a good amount of phytoestrogens in our diet. There's a little bit of misconception when it comes to phytoestrogens, because they're estrogen modulators. They actually help to replace the estrogen that's not there, but they're not synthetic. So they're plant-based occurring estrogens. So it's important that we've got a good amount of those types of foods in there.
Are they kind of compensating for that drop in estrogen? So you're not getting a full-blown sort of estrogen hit as you might have when you were younger, but enough to sort of maintain that function?
Enough to sort of mitigate a little bit of those circumstances that are actually happening. So where you find those types of foods is things, obviously, our soy products. It's really important that if you are using soy in your diet, that it's making sure that it's non-genetically modified and that it's organic. It's also in things like sesame seeds. You get a good amount in there. You get them in things like flaxseed. We need around 50 milligrams of these different forms of phytoestrogens. You can get them from sweet potato. It's also looking at those obviously sort of cruciferous vegetables in our diet, things like broccoli and bok choy, and making sure we've got an abundance of this peppered throughout our diet as well. The other thing to sort of take into consideration is as we actually go into sort of perimenopause and menopause, so menopause is different. Obviously, menopause is considered the 12-month period without having your menses or your period. We still have estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, but they're very much more in a declined manner as well. So we do need to also make sure not only have we got good supporting foods for phytoestrogen-rich foods, we have progesterone-rich foods as well. But we also want to make sure... So
what are they, progesterone-rich foods?
So there's lots of different, so you can do things like your beautiful, so because again, there's not one food that actually is rich in progesterone, we have to do what we can do to build progesterone. So we build progesterone by getting lots of zinc in our diet, omega-3 fatty acids, B6 in our diet as well, and making sure we've got magnesium-rich foods. So that could be things like nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables, lots of different variety of legumes in our diet as well. The benefit of legumes is you've also got the advantage of having not only beautiful sources of phytoestrogens and progesterone-rich foods, but you've also got the huge amount of fibers coming into your diet, and you've also got protein. There is an increase in protein requirement as well. The average requirement of protein is around 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. But what we need to know, what we actually can see when it comes to sort of perimenopause and menopause is that actually increases. So we need to be having around sort of that 1 to 1.2, 1 to 1.5 milligrams, so grams per body weight. So I'm 70 kilos, so I need 70 grams of usable protein. But as we know, or may not know, that's not just going and grabbing a 70-gram piece of chicken. For example, about 100 grams of, say, fish or chicken will get you about 20 to 30 grams of usable protein. So I always advocate to people to just make sure that you have got like protein in every meal and every snack over the day. You have the advantage of then you're going to get that beautiful cross-section of amino acids throughout the day, but also what you're going to get, because it's a very slow-releasing food group, it's incredibly beneficial for keeping us full, but it's also very beneficial when it comes to the glycemic index or our insulin response as well. So we get a more even keel insulin throughout the day.
So why do our needs for protein increase as we start to age? So we go through that.
Yeah. So there's a number of different reasons. As estrogen levels decline, they also work on different hormones in our gut. So they work on different hormones called like CCK or GLP, which is to do with how we actually produce insulin, as well as actually how we actually break down fats in our diet. So our ability to absorb foods changes. So therefore we have to be a little bit more savvy on our requirement of actually eating these certain foods over the day. It also can affect things like ghrelin and leptin and all these different enzymes, which are hormone related as well, and actually how we produce them overall. So the increase actually is really beneficial to sort of mitigate sort of how we may or may not be absorbing. Often when I'm seeing a client, I will look at their pathology and I'll look at their total protein, and we'll often get a decline in total protein, which can be an indication, obviously they're not absorbing it, but it also can be an indication of inflammation.
Right, okay.
And I think the other thing is too, in perimenopause, we have a big increase in sarcopenia, like that muscle loss. Things really start to change around that age. So if we're not focusing on the protein, we're more likely to be losing muscle that we may not get back ever. And if you stay in that state of decline, then you're really not setting yourself up for healthy aging at all.
And then metabolism slows down with less muscle. Right?
Yeah,
and
body
so
shape
changes, burning
not
as fast.
strong.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely that risk of osteopenia overall. I mean, I think there was a statistic that looked at when we sort of hit around that perimenopause, right, our ability to actually build muscle decreases by around 30%. So it's really, as you know, we as women know, this is why it's so important that we have an incredibly good base to begin with, and advocating, weight-bearing exercise from a very young age. Particularly, we're trying to change that sort of generational feeling of what a woman's body should look like, when it comes to building muscle, because it's really, really important that we are doing weight-bearing exercises all the way through our life, simply because the ability to actually build it decreases as we actually hit that perimenopausal and menopausal phases.
Yeah. So can I just grab you there for a sec? So weight-bearing exercise, so you're now talking about a lady that's in perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, but weight-bearing. So this is literally going to the gym and putting some weight on, and because this is actually could be a shift for a lot of women, right? That's like the last thing they're going to do. But it sounds like this is a very important and vital piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely critical. So weight-bearing exercises is not necessarily lifting weights.
Yes,
it could be
that's
using
right.
your own body weight,
Yep.
or you could be doing some more sort of resistance style training, for example, Pilates and yoga. I very much changed the way that I was exercising as I kind of hit into that perimenopausal phase, mainly because I was recruiting my adrenals so much more. I needed to make sure that I wasn't doing an exercise that there was then going to further apply more stress onto my hormones or onto my adrenals. So moving away from sort of that sort of traditional kind of what we kind of consider more of a cardiovascular type burning exercise and going into weight bearing has been incredibly beneficial for myself and from what I've sort of explained to my clients. But when it comes to building muscle mass, what we really want to try and do is we want to try and take our body to fatigue. So for example, even if it's just, for example, a 5 kilo weight is basically lifting that weight as many times as you possibly can till your muscle gets to fatigue. Now, it's really important that you have the correct form when you're doing something like that. The last thing you want to be doing is, lifting weights when you've actually, got the wrong form, because there's a higher risk of you actually injuring yourself. But by lifting weights till fatigue, you're going to tear more fibers and you're actually going to build more muscle mass overall. So that's obviously really good when it comes to the support of our overall, musculoskeletal structure, but it also comes to when we work on our metabolism over as well. More muscle mass requires more energy. The more energy that we can actually kind of support from the food that we're eating.
So when you're breaking down muscle from overutilizing it, like I'm going through to fatigue, the muscle then has to go through an adaptation phase, like it has to rebuild itself. You put the right foods, nutrients in to do so. You're really sending a signal to the body that I need to cope with this increased level of output. And so the body then follows that signal and goes, all right, I'll get you prepared, which is adaptation, to be able to do that. So really, from a longevity point of view, you're sending the signal out that, hey, life's not going to get easy. We're not about to sit on the couch forever. We need to be prepared to get out there and do these things. And if we do that, the body will grow these survival mechanisms or these thriving mechanisms or sustain them right the way through. So it's a signal, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and it's really understanding that there's that healthy amount of stress that the body actually always requires. I mean, it's quite interesting when we talk about different type of diets that are most effective for different stages of our hormones, and fasting always comes up. It's a big one. I get a lot of my clients ask, when is the best time to fast? Now, it's quite interesting if you look at the natural hormonal cycle of a 25-year-old woman. The best time for them to fast is in that follicular phase. It's when their estrogen levels are sort of at a healthy levels. There's no decline. There's less stress within the body as well, and that's a great time. When it comes to perimenopause, because we have such constant fluctuation, fasting in the morning is not a good idea. Naturally, our cortisol levels are already high. Insulin is stepping in to kind of support that mechanism. The last thing that we want to do is create more stress within the body, a high level of cortisol. But also what that's going to do is basically we're going to have the fluctuation throughout the day. But it really, autophagy, as we know, the recruitment of, new cells and getting rid of the old cells is incredibly important. And so I always advise my clients, if you're going to look at fasting, it's stopping from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't always fit our lifestyle though, which is a little bit harder, but you might find that at least trying to have a minimum of 12 hours of not eating, which technically doesn't put you into a high level of fasting, but it's very, very important that we do have those big gaps, that we are creating that healthy amount of stress. And like you said, sending that correct signaling to the body to repair and recuperate.
Well, this is a very personal question, but a husband and wife of a similar age. So if I'm now saying, honey, I've been listening to Zoe, you should be fasting from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon if you're going to do your fasting. Is that the same time, is that effective for me as a man of a similar age or a couple of years older, or am I the opposite?
Yeah, look, it seems like men, I mean, again, it's hard to say, but men, from what research shows is that they can actually fast pretty much anytime. It doesn't seem to have as big of an impact.
Get it easy all the time.
Overall. But, I mean, I think fasting has to be sort of when it works better for you as well. For a lot of people, though, men and women, they still find that maybe their fasting period is actually better done in the morning because it fits their lifestyle better. It's just understanding that you might need to sort of mitigate some of those stress responses and some of those insulin cravings, and then just put the right types of foods, because often what I see when people are fasting is that they might be having these big gaps, but it's when they do start eating again that they're eating the wrong types of foods because they're actually responding to low blood glucose levels.
So those wrong foods
and they're more likely to then eat the higher refined carbohydrate foods, which pretty much, is pointless when it comes to trying to fast. Because you're fueling your body with pro-inflaming foods overall.
And then getting insulin spikes multiple times throughout the day till you start your fast again.
Exactly.
And do you find that sometimes these people that may not be fasting correctly and then jumping into these high carbohydrate foods, sometimes there's some nutrient deficiencies? Like I think fasting tends to work the best when we can deal with those nutrient deficiencies, make sure that they're not low in protein or micronutrients. And then what I do with my women, just through observation, obviously we don't have these studies yet. You would know, Zoe, we've got a lot more around the 16-8 for men and athletes. But I find 14 hours for most of my perimenopausal, menopausal women is something that's quite achievable. And I tend to work with a lot of women too, like me, that are older mums. And we do want to try to eat with our kids and have that family structure. And one thing about being an older mum with little kids is you tend to eat early anyway, because otherwise they get home and they're climbing the cupboards. So you want to have dinner around 5-ish. My daughter will call her a monkey. She's in there and she's just looking for everything.
I've got an 11-year-old. You didn't actually just see my 11-year-old just walk straight past me and gave me because she just came home from school and gave me the where is my food mum eyes. So
I have a 12-year-old who doesn't do that, the boy, but the 8-year-old, she just gets home and wants to eat everything. But an early dinner and then at least 14 hours. And I find that women can cope with that really well, not getting the cravings, nutrition. I mean, we're all a little bit different, of course, but some of the information around fasting, as you alluded to, isn't really set up for perimenopausal women, the 16-8 and things like that.
Yeah, and I think, look, we need to be quite mindful because, when we do get that ovulation decrease, we really do recruit, we really work on our adrenals so much more. And it's imperative that the last thing we want to be doing is keep pummeling our adrenal glands because they are already working overtime, not just for life itself, but they're being recruited to try and, produce a little bit of that or a bit more so of that estrogen and testosterone. So we need to support that.
And also I imagine when we're fasting as well, the cortisol that's being released will be releasing glucose from the muscles as well. So
you
can talk about
without a doubt you'll get that
loss.
glucose spike.
Yeah. So then when we talk about how we start to I suppose in general our adrenal
you do
men as well.
So.
But talking about perimenopause then, so the impact that it has on the adrenals, which we just discussed, and therefore the considerations that we need to have with regards to fasting. In general, though, how should, let's say, a perimenopausal woman start to think about supporting her adrenal glands?
Yeah, look, I mean, I am a massive fan of magnesium. I just don't think that we can actually have enough of it in our diet.
And if you magnesium do, you'll just get diarrhea and then you'll know all about it.
Well,
sorry,
I mean,
you said
if
diet,
you can
by
do,
the way.
yes, that's that. I mean, look,
there's a big difference.
Not the funnest thing to have it. It's also making sure that you've got the right form, so the glycinate form, that the molecule form that you can actually absorb as effectively. There's different types. I mean, I was asked this question before about when we should be taking magnesium. Magnesium as a whole can be taken anytime. It's the additional nutrients that are often put in products. So, for example, if you've got your B vitamins, it's preferential that you're taking those particular magnesiums in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening. It's 60 to 90 minutes before going to bed, and they might have things like some passion flower or some marshmallow root or something that has that sort of soporific kind of calming effect. But the other thing I'm a massive when it comes to supplements is obviously our adaptogenic herbs. Purely because what they're also working on, those adaptogenic herbs, is not just recruiting our adrenal glands, but they're also helping with that DHEA. So DHEA is a supportive hormone. It's a hormone, but basically what it actually does, it helps to build those other hormones. It's got part of that sort of cascade when it comes to supporting adrenaline and cortisol and supporting testosterone as well. So these adaptogenic herbs are just fantastic. So things like ashwagandha, it could be things like ginseng, it could be your turmeric in there as well, your withania. They're just beautiful, and I get such a great result when I can actually sort of pepper that into, particularly for some people, it might be that they need to start taking something like that, from about lunchtime onwards because of the accumulative effect of of cortisol throughout the day, they might find that they just need to start to dampen and quieten everything down, and that, you know, adrenal response from about sort of lunchtime onwards. So then they can effectively work on sleep. The other thing I think is really important to note is obviously sleep and melatonin levels as well, because as we know, as we get older, our melatonin levels do start to decline, men and women. The only other time that we get a big shift in melatonin is around those teenage years. So, you know, you and I are about to head into the teenage world. So that shifts, their whole sleep cycle shifts. So we've got to be mindful that, you know, where they're, you know, we used to get our kids to be able to wake up at sort of 5, 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning. You know, little ones sometimes wake up really early. The older they get, they need to sort of wake up later and go to bed later. Unfortunately, that doesn't always fit the lifestyle as well. So you want to make sure that we're actually supporting the production, their natural production of melatonin. So this is where we might put some like magnesium as well in there, but we might put some things like taurine or lutein. And these are beautiful amino acids that actually help to build the body's natural melatonin.
Have you ever wondered what a healthier, stronger future you might look like? With Melrose FutureLab, Australia's first longevity supplement range, you can now optimise your health span routine by supporting cellular energy, metabolic well-being and muscle maintenance, as well as much, much more. And you can find this range at Chemist Warehouse and leading health food stores.
In your book, because I haven't read, I only just recently found out about it, and I can't wait to get my hands on it and have a look at these foods, because I have heard that not only are you giving all of this advice around foods for balancing hormones, but also I've heard that you have put this together for busy people, like myself too. That's busy, and it's simple in a sense. That's bringing these foods together. So all of these adaptogens, and you're talking about amino acids, is this what's coming through in the book with foods?
Yeah, look, I try to pepper a little bit of it all in there as well. So we've got some maca, we've got some beautiful things like we've got, you know, beetroot powder in there, we've got spirulina powder, and just showing how you can actually eat these foods and you can add them. I mean, I do a fantastic beetroot risotto that's got beetroot in it, plus a little beetroot powder in there as well. So we're getting those beautiful sulfogenic.
When did you say you're putting this on for us?
I'm putting beetroot powder.
No, but when are you putting this on for us? When are you cooking this for us?
Are we just going to hop on a
We're
plane
just inviting
to
ourselves.
Sydney?
This sounds amazing.
We'll have to hop on a plane.
Actually, I am having people over for dinner. It's not that one. You know, a little bit of feta cheese on top, you know, so you've got that sort of lovely earthiness that you get from the beetroot plus the saltiness that you get from the feta, and it just complements it. So, you know, there is a way to actually kind of pull these beautiful nutrients and these supplements into our food just to get more out of what we're eating as well. It's also, you know, I am incredibly busy. I, like everybody else out there, we're sort of, you know, we're doing the juggling act. So even I don't want to spend hours in the kitchen. It doesn't work anymore. There is no time to do it. So it's really making sure that these are, you know, not crazy things that you can't get at any supermarket. I try and make sure that my audience knows that they can get a lot of this food anywhere, you know, from any sort of main supermarkets, because we don't want to sort of be creating recipes that are so unusual that you wouldn't want to sort of put them in there. But there's a couple in there that maybe are a little bit more unusual than the others. Worthwhile trying, though.
I think sadly we, and this is me included, as much as I love food, I understand the power of nutrition. I don't make the time to cook. I'm very lucky. My husband takes great care of me and the family, but he doesn't naturally enjoy cooking. He's looking for something quick and fast. And even though we're trying to, you know, cook food and real food, it's important that we have these things that we know that we can turn to. And as you said, using whole foods most of the time, but maybe you are adding a little bit of, I have a greens powder or a reds powder or something, or understanding that some of these.
Yeah, look, I think the good thing is that these products are so well formulated these days. So, you know, adding them into your smoothies. The one thing that's a bit of a non-negotiable in my life, though, is I have a cold press juicer, and my dad got cancer when I was quite young, so I was probably about 24, and we went down that path of food as medicine. We obviously definitely tapped into, you know, orthodox medicine as well. We you know, get it all from everywhere is my philosophy. But it really kind of opened my eyes to how juicing and cold press juicing is such a good way. So every single day I have a beetroot, carrot, ginger, grapefruit and turmeric juice every day of my life. But I don't have time to juice every day. So I will juice for 3 days. I put it into a glass jar. I put it in the back of my fridge, and I have a small glass every single day. So does my husband. And when I can get Emily into it sometimes. But again, what I'm creating, I mean, obviously it's a beautiful habit. It's a very nourishing, loving habit that I've created. But also what I'm getting in there is I'm getting a huge amount of fiber. I'm getting a huge amount of those beautiful sulfogenic, beta carotene rich antioxidant and anti-inflammatory rich foods as well. I cannot stress enough the importance of having a lot of fiber in your diet. Most of us actually do get enough protein, to be really honest. Most of us don't get enough fiber in our diet as well. So we really want to make sure that it's fiber, not soluble and insoluble alone, but we are really looking at things like resistant starch, because exactly like the name says, it's resistant. It goes all the way down your gastrointestinal tract and really starts to feed that bacteria that is in your colon. And that's what actually helps to rid estrogen. Like, you've got bacteria that's got these little estrogen receptors on it. And what you want to make sure is that those bacteria is being fed, so then we don't have circulating estrogen in our body as well.
Estrogen metabolites.
So,
beta-glucuronidase.
So all of those metabolites that work in a different way to the original estrogen that can be actually quite harmful.
Yes. So actually that just cut out a little bit then.
Oh, I think you were just talking about recirculating estrogen. So as you metabolize these things, you can make more reactive compounds that can cause oxidative stress, DNA damage, leading to potentially even at risk of estrogen-related cancers and things. So you do want to be clearing them, as you said, and gut health is obviously so important for that.
Yes, it absolutely is. I mean, and again, obviously you've got that gut-brain axis, it's very understanding that symbiotic nature between the gut and the brain. We want to make sure that, the neurochemicals that we're producing are affecting our gut as much as what we're eating is affecting our brain overall.
Yeah, so you just touched on areas of detox there as well. I think when we think of detox, we typically think of the liver, but the gut's obviously an organ of detoxification as well. And you touched on the microbiome there and how important that is. Speaking or thinking more broadly then, at this stage of life, what should we be thinking about when it comes to supporting detox overall?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, like I said before, it's really making sure that we've got a lot of those cruciferous vegetables coming into our diet. So we've got things like, our broccoli, our bok choy in our diet. We have a lot of good, diverse sort of amino acids, because again, that pathways require those branched chain amino acids. So lots of different good quality protein overall. I like to sort of tap into things like glutathione, which is just or resveratrol. I think they're just incredible when it comes to their power as an antioxidant. And again, particularly when we look at sort of those sort of phase one detoxing, so with the food that we're eating, that phase one, they can be incredibly overall enriching in that process. But again, it's very much looking at that elimination, making sure that we've got the right type of, fibers overall, and just making sure that we are moving as well. Just that process of moving, will actually help that clearance process to support us throughout those detox pathways.
Well, sweating as well.
When we say clearance, we're talking, for listening, we're talking about you actually using your bowels daily, urinating to the kidneys, and then sweating as well, getting rid of these things.
One of the things my great chiropractor mate got me onto was the importance of magnesium, as you mentioned earlier, and the amount of detoxification pathways that are powered by magnesium or enabled by magnesium. And so when I started taking it to the degrees he told me to, he said, look, you're going to have like almost a keto flu. You're going to have phlegm coming off. You're going to cough. Always get it out. He said, always get it out. Choose a socially acceptable way to get that phlegm out. But for about 2 years, I literally started down this process of regular magnesium. For 2 years, my body was releasing this phlegm from just having solid regular magnesium powder, and a couple of scoops, couple of times a day, and just clean me. And eventually, I was like, and then I noticed if I have dairy or if I have wheat gluten, then the next day, bang, all that phlegm's there again, all coming out.
Comes back again.
If I've really clean in my diet and I'm on the magnesium, there's nothing there. But as soon as I put it in, bang, there it is again, thicker coming out. So
interesting. Magnesium does tend to give more loose bowels. Like if you, it draws water into the bowel and usually coming out the other end than phlegm. But I guess everyone's different. Maybe he knew what was going on in your body.
Yeah, well, he spoke about the pathways that
there's
that
hundreds
enables,
of enzymatic pathways.
Yes.
That
Yeah,
Well, I
magnesium.
mean, we definitely know if we get sort of mucus in the stool, it's an indication that there's a lot of inflammation coming through the gut as well.
I wanted to ask you, Zoe, I haven't obviously looked at the book yet, and I will as a perimenopausal woman, but also just someone that loves food. And again, reinforcing that I heard that not only are there wonderful recipes that taste good, they're simple, and I think that's really attractive for us because most people are too busy to be cooking, unfortunately. That's the reality of the world. But you mentioned at the beginning too about some of the seeds, flax seeds, things like that.
Yes.
And I personally don't prescribe seed cycling, probably don't know enough about it, but I do have patients that come to me. Is that something that you talk about in the book?
And no, actually, it's not something I'm talking about in, but I am a massive believer of getting the right amount of sort of nuts and seeds in our diet overall, particularly when we look at things like hemp seeds. Hemp seeds is one of these particular seeds that basically has the perfect ratio of omega-3, 6 and 9 for the body to actually absorb. And it's also obviously an incredibly high, rich amount of protein in there as well. If you're finding that, for the lignans and things like that some people can feel that there's a little bit of intolerances to some of the seeds in there. You can actually activate them. So it's quite easy to do. You can soak them overnight and then put them into a low temperature. Just you can Google, what the degrees that you should be adding into the oven and for what duration of time. But what that does is obviously breaks down the protein and makes it a little bit easier for people to absorb. But we really do need around 30 grams of nuts and seeds in our diet. I think it's just such a simple way to add ample amount of these good fats and protein. And again, you could just sort of sprinkle, when my daughter has a Vegemite sandwich, I sprinkle a little bit of hemp seeds in there, or, when we're making some, gorgeous sort of chimulas and things like that, I'll put some hemp seeds in there. So it's quite simple to sort of add these foods into the diet.
What about hemp seed oil? We talk a lot about seed oils. Is hemp seed oil, when you talk about the perfect balance between 3, 6 and 9, how is hemp seed oil?
Yeah, look, I also like hemp seeds. It's just very, very important that you're buying a product that actually has been extruded correctly, so it hasn't had heat applied to it, and then it's very important is how it's stored as well, because any of these oils, not so much olive oil because of the incredibly high antioxidant content of olive oil. You just need to make sure that they're stored and there's no oxidative stress that's actually happened, because again, it actually unfortunately renders them less active and more likely to have an unstable molecule, which again, obviously is, from a health point of view, is not good.
Yeah, so it goes rancid.
Yes.
So we've spoken up until this point mainly about perimenopause, and we've had a look at some of the dietary considerations, lifestyle, exercise, some of the herbs that we can consider, the adaptogens such as ashwagandha. So this is the period where obviously hormones start to fluctuate and decline and ultimately lead into menopause. So are there any specific considerations dietary-wise or lifestyle that may change or may need to be adapted from when you actually go through perimenopause into menopause?
Yeah, look, I think what's really, really important, obviously, is that we're looking at things like our calcium intake when we come to sort of menopause. You want to look about sort of 1,300 milligrams of calcium because, again, we're not going to be absorbing it effectively. We also need to obviously make sure that we've got a good amount of sort of the phytoestrogen content. So we look about, like we were saying, around sort of 50 milligrams. We can sort of up that a little bit more as well because we are relying on sort of these plant-based estrogens to support it. Obviously, HRT is not my area of expertise, but again, it's always important to kind of have conversations with your GP because there's some very, bioidentical, there's some really good supportive gels and creams and things that you can actually be looking at. Your protein requirement does increase that little bit more as well. So you are kind of leaning now a little bit more on that sort of 1.5 grams of protein. And again, about 40 grams of fiber a day. And just very mindful on our lifestyle choices. Again, the liver has been working very hard for a very, very long time. So this is now not the time to be consistently, bombarding it with sort of high toxic foods. So mindful of the amount of alcohol that we're consuming, mindful of the sort of those high sugar, ultra processed foods, and really making sure we're not having those particular foods in the diet. But it's really, it's looking at that weight management, making sure that we are, we have the right balance and the right types of exercise. We're still really pushing towards that sort of, weight-bearing exercise. That's very, very important. And just making sure that we're not slowly increasing our weight.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about 50 milligrams, if I heard it correctly, the phytoestrogens. Can you tell us what that means from a food, what that would look like?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So 50 grams is going to be about 15 grams of, for example, flax seeds is probably what it is. It's probably looking at about a quarter of a cup of sort of sweet potatoes. You could do a lovely sweet potato mash in there. It's probably about a half a cup of things like your broccoli in the diet as well. And when it comes to sort of soy products, it's probably about sort of a quarter of a cup of soy, a tablespoon of miso paste. And you could just sort of pepper those throughout the day. I mean, I've got an amazing recipe in there, which is a miso omelette with prawns. So it's a really, simple way to kind of get that miso in there. It doesn't have to be a miso soup.
Yeah.
We can actually use that as our beautiful flavour, enhance our umami flavour, and we can sort of dapple it that way.
Should I be avoiding the miso omelette with prawns if I'm a male, though?
No,
is that still okay?
Do you know what Kelly Slater told me? Kelly Slater.
Everybody needs phytoestrogens.
Okay,
That's the thing.
Kelly Slater recommends having miso on toast. He said, because we love Vegemite.
Oh, right.
We're
yes, that's because he hasn't tasted Vegemite. That's why.
Well, he actually said to me, he said, you're an Australian. He said, you'll love this. He said, instead of Vegemite, use miso. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So there you go. We've got some tips from Kelly Slater.
That's very funny, isn't it? Like it is. But I think, we love those umami flavours. So, and you can use it. I mean, I use bone broth in absolutely everything savoury. I use it in my salad dressings. I put like a quarter of a teaspoon in there, just a great way to get a little bit more of those fermented foods into your diet.
I've got the best of the bone, like the whole lot, all of them. I've tried all those because they're all coming out with such amazing bone broths now. It's literally my thing. I'm like, oh my God, what's this one today?
Yeah.
There's the healing mushrooms.
No, I'm like you. I get very excited by them, like the reishi mushroom and the turmeric. And
I've got the turmeric one. I've got the best of the turmeric.
It's interesting about bone broth because it's something that generally we have not been familiar with, or at least we've forgotten about for really generations. So what's so special about bone broth?
Well, the benefit is you've got something that has a little bit of collagen in it. I mean, think about your grandma. Right? So your grandma used to basically get all the leftover bones, she'd render them down, all that collagen and that gelatinous food would then, be broken down. We'd use it. We use it in every part of it as well because it has such a beautiful anti-inflammatory purpose to it. It can help to kind of support a little bit of our own collagen pathways as well. And some of them are even like, have got the addition, like we said, we've got the other benefits of those beautiful anti-inflammatory foods. We've got the turmeric, we've got the curcumin, and synergistically they work so beautifully together. And I think, there's nothing nicer than kind of tapping into the way we used to do things because there was such a sort of love process and it worked so well. It's more about convenience. I mean, I do have all the best of bone range, I must admit as well. And again, I find that just a tablespoon of that in a cup, that was, I was quite busy this afternoon. I had a piece of toast with avocado, olive oil, tomato, and I had a tablespoon of the best of bone in hot water. Now that pretty much was covering all my nutritional requirements. And it was really time saving as well.
And it's tasty,
It's super tasty.
Hearty.
Yeah, I do the same thing, just spoonful in water sometimes. It's getting a bit hot and humid on the sunny coast right now. I don't know if I'll be having much of it, but definitely is just a really good snack. I work from home and I don't really love sitting all day. We all know that we shouldn't, but that is my life.
Yes.
But I always want snacks. Like I'm back and forward. It almost keeps me at the computer, particularly when I'm trying to create content. So things like that, putting the bone broth in the water is just something that I know is nourishing, know is good, it's satisfying something, but it's not choosing another food.
I've had a little thing coming. Sorry, you go. Sorry.
I think it stops you also going for that, second or third coffee. That's what I find.
It absolutely does,
as well.
the thing that I've been coming up lately with so many of our podcasts that we've been doing and what I've been learning is this really defined relationship between convenience versus reverence.
Yes.
You know, like,
yes.
So convenience is a gigantic trap that we go down because it's convenient. But as soon as we practice reverence, even you're talking about it so much, when your eyes light up, you know, your face lights up when you talk about the food and the preparation and everything else. Reverence is just surrounded by so many great practices. It's like almost a central piece of so much magic.
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting. I mean, my favourite movie is a movie called Like Water for Chocolate. So it's an old movie. It's about a mother with three daughters, and the daughter has to basically look after her mother, and she's a bit pissed off, obviously, because the other daughters have got to do with their own life. But every time she cooks, that emotion that she's feeling comes out in that food. And for me, I think what I've tried to always apply, yes, being busy is definitely something we are all part of, but we cannot use that as our reasoning or our motivation to actually kind of excuse bad choices, because that will catch up with us at some time. And, you know, it's basically creating those small habits, those small pathways that actually create such a huge impact. I mean, for example, like I said, my juice is a non-negotiable, because I know that if I do that, it has such a positive effect throughout the rest of my day. It sets me up in a path that then will give me, you know, the motivation to do other things. So sometimes we just need to really break it down into those little bite-sized chunks, you know, and find that one thing that can be the catalyst to actually help to support these behavioural mechanisms that kind of, you know, lead us into really, really good health practice. And 80% of the time, that's great. 20%, you can pretty much do whatever you want. 20% if you're doing that 80.
Yeah. One of my kind of hacks is if I'm being good, it's twice a week, but it just makes such a difference to my eating if I just do a tray of roasted vegetables.
Yes.
And with all the colours, you know, and the beetroot and the carrot and the zucchini and just whatever, just as many veggies as I can get in, because then I'm set up for the next day. And if my husband's cooked and there's some meat or chicken left over, then I've got my veggies and I can add them to everything. I don't even mind having them in eggs with breakfast, you know, just eggs. And it just sets me up for a couple of days of just getting all of this food, and I don't have to worry that my children will eat it on me, because unfortunately they're not as excited by the vegetables as me. But I can do that a couple of times a week.
A little trick also that you can do. So if you have, you know, say you're getting to day 4 and those veggies are not kind of quite as nice, chuck them into the blender, get a little bit of bone broth and hot water, and you can make it into a soup. Or alternatively, you can actually blend it, put some extra virgin olive oil and some nuts in there, and you have a pasta sauce or you have a dip. So the thing is, you really can. I mean, we do the same thing. We do it. You're doing tick, tick. But we're the same. We every week I do a thing of roast summer, winter, it doesn't matter. There is roasted capsicum. I could almost show you, I have a thing of roasted tomatoes. I have a thing of roasted eggplant. I've got people coming over for dinner tonight. I don't know what I'm cooking yet, but I just roast a heap of vegetables because you know they're going to taste so good.
Yeah.
You know, you've got that gorgeous olive oil in there. You've got those beautiful quality salts in there. It's really simple and it doesn't take long.
Yep. I agree.
Even the way you just said that gorgeous olive oil, like that's the reverence word for me. Like it's
isn't it?
The love of food, the love of, because it can be, you can love food and take yourself down a dark path, or you can love food and take yourself down a light path. You know, like
it's so true. It's so true.
But it sounds like what I just heard here also is it doesn't have to be difficult. So when Denise spoke about sort of preparing roast veggies, I suppose what you can also do is just prep your veggies just by cutting them up into individual containers and just having a choice of things that you can just quickly throw together. So it's as simple as possible.
Even for the kids, if I chop up carrot and celery and, you know, well, maybe not celery, they don't love that, I'm lying, carrot, cucumber, you know, if you put those things, they're going to eat that. You know, they're happy to eat that. My daughter actually eats quite well. She wants to eat all the time, but she's happy to eat good food, but it needs to be there and be easy.
I'm just getting so much from you today, Zoe, about the passion of it and the way you light up when you talk about food. I've got an idea. You should write a book and call it Eat Your Way to Healthy Hormones.
He's like, oh my goodness.
That's a great idea.
I thought you were going to reach over.
Taking notes.
I thought you were going to reach over and show the book then. I thought you were going to reach over and be like, oh, funny you say that.
Funny you should say that. Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Oh wow, that was quick, wasn't it?
So we've covered a lot of ground here, and there seems to be obviously a recurrent theme, whether you're, I suppose, younger and you're still sort of in early life and sort of managing your hormone health right through to perimenopause and menopause. If we were to sum up what we've just covered, I suppose, what would be sort of the top 3 or 5 things that we need to consider as a takeaway here?
Yeah. Look, I think the number one thing I always say to people, be your own health advocate. It is really, really important that you understand your own pathology. Go and see your doctor. Start out, you need to know what's actually happening inside of you from a blood test result, because then what you've got a bit of a baseline as well. The other thing is get involved in food. I mean, a lot of the choices I make are very socially based. So, for example, I go to Bondi markets on Saturday morning because it's a great way to see my friends, great way to see my neighbourhood. Emily's just finished netball. She's starving, is annoying and wants to eat. So I take it down there. But then what I do is I buy all my fruits and vegetables for the week. I buy my proteins for the week. So I very much weave this kind of health journey into my lifestyle as well. And the other thing is be curious. Be curious to try new things. Be curious to kind of, see what it feels like, because one step in front of the other, one little health choice in front of the other, before you know it, if you give yourself the time, you have to give yourself at least 6 months to make these changes. If you do one little thing each week, before you know it, you've actually got a pretty good blueprint of what a good health is to you, but also it's going to be weaved into your life, not out of someone else's advice. You're going to weave what actually works for you overall.
I love your message. You're doing a really amazing job of spreading it. I can feel it's like it's inspired me. Besides the fact that I'm really hungry now that we talked about this. But a question.
Was it the omelette? It was the miso omelette.
It was
with the prawns, yeah.
I like the bone broth idea.
Yeah, with the veggies.
The pasta sauce and everything. Look, one question that we ask everyone, Zoe, and it's, obviously yourself and us, we're all working in a similar area, and we love this word longevity, but we really see longevity as that extra 10 plus years that are lived very healthily with full energy, full life force, So given we're all successful at this, why would you want an extra 10 years? What would you do with it? What are you going to do with this extra life force that you have into the future?
Yeah. Look, for me personally, it has got a lot to do with my daughter. I think, because I did IVF for 5 years, I had 3 miscarriages and a pretty shitty journey, excuse my language. I really wanted to be a very present mum. And because I could only have one child, I want to be healthy. I want to be there at all stage. My mum very sadly had a stroke when she was 70, and we've been managing her and looking after her health ever since. But it's heartbreaking to see where a gorgeous, vivacious woman, because of this stroke, has been rendered unable to live that quality and that health span, that beautiful, healthy life that she wanted. So, I mean, we're all guilty of overindulging. That's not what we're saying, not to do. But there are simple choices that you can make on a daily basis. Again, I'll recruit that juice as my example, to actually mitigate some of the impact that, toxic lifestyle can do to us, and, give us that quality of life, so I can be there for my daughter and sort of learn from what's happened to my mum.
I love that beautiful link with your mum and your daughter and that lineage that you talk of. It's really beautiful. Thank you for that.
So my final question is usually, and I still would like to know this, usually what do you do to take care of yourself? Now, we know that food is really important, but perhaps is there a few key supplements or things? But I also want to know, as someone who's very interested in your book, is there a favourite recipe? What should I look for aside from the omelette?
Oh yes.
Which one should we look for?
Okay, so my favourite recipe is, there is a side of salmon, and I've used all these beautiful Australian native herbs. I've also got a house in Queensland, which we actually bought for my mum, but she got sick. And so I love going to Noosa markets.
I'm in Noosa.
And how this recipe got devised was, I was at Noosa market one day, and there was this guy there selling like native Aboriginal spices that I didn't even know what they were. And so I just started playing around with it, and I started throwing it on this side of salmon. And then I thought, what else do I have in? I had some grapefruit, so I sliced up some grapefruit and I put that on it. And then I popped it into the oven and I brought it out, and I was like, oh my God, that is orgasmic. It was just the most beautiful dish. It was just, but again, in this particular recipe, I've adapted it so it's not, necessarily the native herbs that you can't get. It's some that you can get, but the flavour with that beautiful lipid oiliness that you get from salmon, to that acidity that cuts through, that oiliness, and then that, that earth, the earthy flavours that you get from the different spices. It's just exquisite, and it's so easy to cook. I'm not joking. You throw it all on, you bung it in the oven, and it's done in half an hour.
I can guarantee you that none of us are going to stop eating at 4 p.m. today.
I wish that's
right.
No, that's all right. This is not the time to do that.
I'm so glad I asked, because I live in the Noosa hinterland. I'm in Doonan, and I go
great.
to the markets on
Perfect.
Sunday.
I love Doonan.
Exactly where you went, and so I will be looking out for those herbs and making that.
Yes.
So, and then just quickly, what are you doing for yourself aside from the food? Is there a couple of key supplements? Is there just a couple of things that you think are the game changer for you?
Yeah. Look, I had chronic eczema as a child, so I have never stopped taking a probiotic. I take a probiotic every single day of my life. I also am incredibly focused on gut lining and making sure that I'm mitigating any inflammation. So I focus on zinc every day, most days as well. And again, look, I do sort of pepper different supplements. A lot of what I do now at this age is liver support. So I take milk thistle. I take a particular supplement that actually helps to kind of work with supporting that liver pathway. But also when it comes to my lifestyle choices, I've got heavily involved in yoga. I'm really challenging myself. My yoga studio closed about a month ago, and so I've leveled up and I've gone to something that I didn't think. I'm doing Ashtanga, where I've got to learn my own sequence. And what I've noticed about myself is there's a bit of an internal battle going on here, because I need to submit to this process to actually learn. So I think, the take-home point for me on this was that challenging yourself can really have an incredible, rewarding feeling. And it's not a physical response. It's the mental response that I was so excited about as well, because becoming like a teenager again and having to not throw tantrums and just having to kind of listen to what this teacher's saying has been a really eye-opening experience. But mind you, I'm doing all right. She said I was doing really good the other day.
It sounds like a challenging but also a very rewarding experience. And what a great way to keep your youthfulness.
Yeah.
So it really sounds like, these challenges, but, trying new things that can be so difficult when you're young, but so rewarding as a result of that.
Absolutely.
And growth.
And when you're seeing a woman who's 75 and doing it better than you, then you go, that's inspiring.
Absolutely.
That is inspiring.
Look, we could keep on going and going. There's so much interesting and useful information that you have imparted. So before we do leave, where can people find you? How can they get their information? How can they find your book?
Yes, so you can find my book at all major retailers, which is very, very exciting. You can obviously follow me on social media. If you are around the hinterlands of near the Tullabudgera Valley, I'm also running a retreat at Gwingana Health Retreat from December 1st to 5th, which will sort of tap on all of these fantastic things. Or you can email me. We can go old school. You can email me at zoe@nutritionaledge.com.au.
Fantastic. Zoe Bingley-Pullin, it has been an absolute sensation to have a really meaningful and useful chat with you about this. It's been really sort of a knowledge imparting experience for me as well. So thank you so much.
I will not be throwing out the roast veg at 4 days. Thanks, Zoe.
Ever again. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for everyone for listening as well.
No, thank you. Pleasure.